Are you or your team having trouble implementing AI into your content creation, whether it's for on air or for your radio station website? Well, today we'll talk with Pete Pachal, a seasoned journalist and media executive, about the impact of AI in media and specifically radio stations.
You're listening to Better Radio Websites, the definitive podcast for radio professionals who want their websites to generate more traffic and substantial revenue. Get time-tested techniques, secret tricks, and valuable tools in online content, marketing, analytics, security, social media, and much more. Ready for your radio station to dominate digital in your market? Here we go.
Hi, it's Jim, and welcome to Better Radio Websites, the podcast that wants to help you get more visitors and the most revenue from your radio station website. And this week, we're talking about implementing AI into your content creation to do better or more content creation. And having an awesome time chatting with Pete Pachal. If you don't know Pete, be sure that you familiarize yourself with him, because him and his podcast, the Media Copilot, is it's gaining a whole lot of traction because of AI and how it's just affecting everything, especially how we do things here in the media business, whether it be TV, print, or radio. And Pete is a seasoned journalist. He's a media executive also. He's had editorial roles at Red Ventures, Mashable, NBCUniversal. I have to actually read it because there are so many big names in this. His insights on AI and other tech has been featured in Fast Company, Forbes, Time Magazine, PC Magazine, and all kinds of others. This guy's a big shot, and he knows his stuff when it comes to tech and especially AI. I've been listening to his Media Copilot podcast for several weeks now, and it's just so thrilling to have Pete on here to talk about the AI and get his insights on how it's affecting media and specifically radio stations. Pete Pachal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure.
You've written for all of these publications and done all of this tech. You're kind of like a nerd like me, I think.
A little bit.
Yeah, always forward thinking. You probably have the latest iPhone, the iOS. You got the VR headset. You're probably the one that everybody comes to when. What do you think about this new tech thing or something like that? You seem like that guy. Have you always been a tech nerd like that?
I am often called upon for tech advice and tech support to the point where I feel like I should be charging for it. But on my iPhone purchases, I've actually gotten pretty conservative in the last few years because I just felt like I couldn't economically sustain getting a new iPhone every year. So I'm looking forward to the new ones this fall because I'm due for an upgrade for sure. But I've always, had a bit of a tech inclination. I actually took engineering in my undergrad, if you can believe that, but quickly realized I much more enjoyed writing, and writing specifically for an audience. So I joined the campus paper when I was taking my undergrad, and after graduating, I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if this is a thing. And went to journalism school, did an internship in New York, and I've been lucky enough to get jobs, mostly at tech publications ever since. So yeah.
Wow. And so where did the AI come into that? Were you like an early adopter of this AI stuff, or did you hear about it when Open Labs first introduced ChatGPT, or how's your journey been with that?
Right. Well, how could you have not heard about it at that point? But before the whole debut of ChatGPT, I had been covering tech for a long time. Mostly thought of Google as the leader in AI for a while, and they kind of were. They had a number of years where they were saying they wanted to do more stuff with AI, and they sort of did primitive versions of what we think of as AI today. So, everyone probably remembers Gmail started introducing autocomplete a number of years ago. There's the new AI overviews in search, but before that even, Google had started doing a little bit of AI on search and started doing like zero-click searches and essentially giving you selected answers here and there, not as sort of a matter of standard practices, which clearly what they're doing now. So yeah, I'd sort of closely followed AI, but it felt like the progress of it wasn't really that fast. until ChatGPT arrived on the scene, and then it just injected a massive amount of like, the most intense cold brew you could think of into an industry, and now it's just been nonstop ever since, with advance after advance and announcement after announcement. It doesn't show any signs of slowing down.
Yeah. What is your preferred AI? Is it ChatGPT? Is it the Gemini? Which one? There are a lot. It seems like everybody's coming out with one of their own different model, and they're getting better and faster. Which ones do you prefer?
It's funny. A lot of people say they don't like to pick winners. I actually love to pick winners because I used to be, doing a lot of tech reviews. So you kind of needed to pick winners. But the thing is, it's usually not as clear cut as people want the answer to be. So I find AIs, once you get to know most of these chatbots, they're kind of good at some things and others are good at other things. And so for my go-tos are two of the big ones, which is ChatGPT, but also Claude, which not a lot of people use outside of people in the know. People in the know understand Claude, which is Anthropic's chatbot. Sort of understand it's actually really, really good, particularly at prose, particularly at writing. Claude is very, very good. So if you want sort of a writing buddy or a writing assistant, I find Claude is my go-to. That said, ChatGPT has so many convenience features now, things like custom instructions, things like memory. You could quickly write a GPT, which is sort of their app store thing, and then you can sort of call upon it in a chat. That I just find it's a go-to, and it's very, very reliable. It's very good. They've sort of progressively gotten better over the last couple of years. That it's always sort of on the cutting edge in terms of the quality of the output.
Sure. One thing that I really love about about ChatGPT and how better it's gotten is the fact that you can take a screenshot and say, "This is the error I'm getting in my program," or something like this. Why am I getting this error? And it will read everything that's in the image and give you a reason why. So it's just like somebody that's actually looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, what you're getting at there is like the multimodal functionality. And I think some of these things that were fairly new even 6 months ago are now starting to be expected. And, this is one of the weaknesses of things like Claude and others. If they don't have all of these convenience features, whether it's multimodal or the ability to browse the web, is now becoming an expected thing to sort of complement whatever you're doing. If it doesn't have that, you're just going to kind of use that less and less. But yeah, 100% multimodal is going to be a thing. I know a lot of people, particularly if they work at home, are now dictating to the AI, right? They're used to essentially talking to it like an assistant. And, we've seen the demos that OpenAI showed a couple of months ago where, it wasn't just chatting with you. It was kind of like flirting with you too. It had these sort of personality characteristics. I think that's going to become increasingly an expectation. And it's going to make maybe for some awkward office situations if you're in sort of a shared environment. But I think it's all just going to be standard stuff 6 months to a year from now.
Sure. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you talk about, obviously this podcast is about radio stations. Our listeners are radio station people. They're content creators. They're news people. We have some, and you being a journalist and in newsrooms, and you kind of have this, and not to mention your company is actually giving coaching and giving advice to people in newsrooms and stuff like that. Kind of talk to. I've heard radio news people they're kind of like, oh, okay, well that AI is interesting, and then I've heard from some that are like adamantly, no, I'm not even going to touch it. Don't even speak AI. What do you say to those folks?
Yeah, so when people are really, really opposed to AI, I think it's for probably one of three reasons, I would say. There's probably three buckets here. And by the way, healthy skepticism is good. Just, again, as a journalist, I totally share that. But if they're really adamantly opposed to it, I think there's either there's like one of three things. It's like either they fear their job, that it's going to replace them in some way, and this is, I think, starting to become more common among journalists, they think it's going to lead to an overall sort of deadening or lowering of quality of content, which I think is a much more reasonable fear. And then the last one is like maybe they have bought into sort of this, doomsday scenario stuff, which I don't know if I can help a lot there, because that to me seems like there's probably just sort of, I don't know that those, I actually don't know if those are worth of concern. I just know at the level of AI that we interact with on a day-to-day, there's not much we can do about that. If someone's building Skynet, they're going to build it. But and the first one, when they're fearing their job, I think that stems mostly from a lack of knowledge and a lack of education, and they haven't really used these tools much. Because once you see the weaknesses of AI, once you see that it sort of screws things up either through hallucinations or just the sort of not so great language it tends to use, like, if you get an AI response, you tend to see the word revolutionize a lot and
Right.
juncture and these things. You're like, okay, and there's ways to sort of, train it not to do that. But, you can start to see like, oh, you know what? My role is still relevant as a human. You're like, I need to sort of guide this thing, even though it might increase productivity. I still have a role here. So I think that once you get there, I think you might transition to the next one, which is like, oh, I fear quality of content is just going to go down. That's a very legitimate fear. And again, I think more education, not just in terms of the weaknesses, but in terms of how to train the AI to do better, to make it be a better assistant to you. So like using things like, even if it's just ChatGPT memory, and you can get even really advanced with that and start putting documents in a cloud somewhere that the AI can call upon, so that quality of answers around that knowledge get a lot better. These are somewhat advanced techniques, but the more you learn, the more you sort of apply it, the more you're going to start to realize, oh, you know what, as a partner, it's actually going to enhance my productivity if I learn how to use it. And I'm starting to see that more and more, obviously with individuals, certainly with organizations. I mean, it's what I do day to day with my company, the Media Copilot. We train teams, creative teams, either in newsrooms or marketing teams or PR teams, on ways they can use it as individuals and as an organization. And most people come away from those classes really like inspired and just like, oh yeah, there's like all these apps I should just check out and maybe add to my day-to-day. And once you do that, I think sort of a lot of that adamant opposition goes away.
Sure. Do you see a lot of like newsrooms? How do you see the newsrooms implementing AI? Are they taking it right off the shelf, going to ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic or whatever like that? Or are they uploading a bunch of their own stuff and using that as a training in the model to make what they do better?
So there's a few different levels to this. Like, I think we're kind of getting out of the phase for sort of most newsrooms anyway, of the experimental phase. I mean, I think a lot of places are still experimenting, but just giving your staff some access to ChatGPT, I think that's pretty standard now, and sort of seeing what they do and pairing that with some kind of AI policy of like what's allowed in terms of content, which is usually don't use it in content, and that's a fine rule to have, is usually what the norm is. But I feel like we're starting to move out of that, and from what I'm hearing, there's things being built or things taken off the shelf that are more systemic. That is, okay, now that we kind of have figured out a few of the things, like the low-hanging fruit of production, how do we implement that system-wide? And it usually involves an app, right? It's usually like a platform, either for your CMS or a plugin for WordPress or something like that. It's like, okay, now I have a button that's going to create social media copy, for example. It's going to create, SEO headlines is another big one. These are the low-hanging fruit. And all those sort of use cases that are low on the tree tend to be at the two sides of the pipeline. If you think of creating a story, so there's like the stuff you put in, which is the research, the ideas. ChatGPT is a great research assistant. So is Claude. So is Perplexity. All of that stuff you can kind of use to help craft your story, as well as like bounce your story off the AI to sort of make it a little better. Then there's the writing, which again, dicey if you're applying AI there. I wouldn't say it's always a bad idea. There are probably some use cases that it's kind of okay, especially if you have human in the loop. But generally, not many places are doing that. Like, there's serious journalistic operations are basically, it should be human driven, and I think that's generally a good idea. But then on the other end, again, it's that side of the pipeline, the social media, the distribution, and just making sure that your content sort of reaches the audience you're going for. And just one more word about that. I feel like that's such a go-to place for most journalists because over the last 15 years or so, every journalist on some level had to become a content marketer for their own stories, right? Because you couldn't just write the story. You had to also write all the chrome, and then throw it in all these platforms. And, if you had a social media team, maybe some of that was alleviated, but usually not. Like I've worked at a lot of places with social media teams and there was still an expectation journalists would kind of do this. Sure. And nobody liked it. Some people may get good at it, but you kind of just wanted to write your story and move on to the next story.
That's right.
Now, to some extent, AI is helping there. Like it's at least now, like this is the whole thing, the promise of AI, right? You're getting some of your time back. It's not perfect, you got to train it. You got to make sure the copy isn't going off in some weird direction. But generally, I think most people are saving time that way. And, I think journalists will at least, even if they're super opposed to it, at least they'll support that, I think. You don't have to write your social posts anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I heard that quote early on is that AI won't replace people. People with AI will replace people without it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair comment. It just comes down to productivity. Like how much are you really outputting on a certain day? Again, not every journalist job, actually few journalist jobs I would hope have actual quotas, but like over time, you certainly look at how much you've done and how much traffic that's pulled in or whatever your measure is. And you're just going to be able to do more if you have this sort of technological assist with you. Now, certainly people at the top levels of their profession, if you're a really well-known investigative journalist or a columnist or something like that, your work is really good. I'm pretty sure you're going to be fine even without AI. But for most positions now, like, whether it's entry level or, a beat reporter or an editor, it's about getting stuff out there and getting eyeballs on it. And the more you can do that, the better. So, by implementing AI, like if you could, again, these promises of like 10x productivity are ridiculous, but if you could get 1.5 or 2x, that's significant. And, any organization that is looking to grow or get leaner, which is probably more the case these days, needs to be looking at that and figuring out who is, driving those numbers up and to the right, as they say. And if you have the skills, you're going to be able to do that better than your colleagues who don't.
What do you think that if you use AI, that you should say that you're using AI in everything that you do? I mean, I use Grammarly. I don't say that that it fixed all my mistakes, or I'm using AI to fix all my mistakes.
It's a weird conundrum here because I agree with you. It generally, as AI gets more and more common, as it plugs itself into various workflows, it's going to become like Microsoft Word or whatever, like it's just going to be like, oh, there's an expectation AI participated here. The difference is here now AI is kind of a co-author in some ways. So I do feel like it's getting granular, but that still needs a certain amount of disclosure. Because we reveal who bylines are, and if it's the computer, you got to say it's the computer. Few nuances here. One is that if you disclose that an AI wrote something, what does that change in terms of the reader perception? And they've done some studies on this. They really need to do more because there was some surprising bits in the study. Like one, it's generally people distrusted the AI content, or rather the site. Here's the subtle. They would distrust the site a little more if they used AI, but the content itself, they actually trusted it more than the human one. And if I might be misstating here something here, but there were some surprising results in how they were reacting to AI on the granular level, and you could sort of see why this would happen because. There's a lot of mistrust in media these days. Everyone's sort of watching for bias and things like that. And I think with AI, there's at least a perception, if it's written by a computer, that it might be biased for you. Obviously, that's wrong in terms to think about it. Like the data that fuels the AI can certainly be biased, and we've seen evidence of that here and there. But People are people. They're going to react to things how they react to them. So I think as people implement AI in the content process, you need to really think about how is that going to alter your relationship with your audience, if at all.
Yeah. So what do you think so going forward, what do you think tomorrow is going to look like? What's the future look like for AI? Should the people who are adamantly against it, should they get on board with it now? Should they at least dip their toes in the water to be prepared for what's to come next? What do you see?
Yeah, so I think we're going to see a lot of scaling of those two sides of the pipeline. So what we're going to see, there's going to be, and for those people still opposed, still skeptical, I think even if you forget the headlines and whatever else, as a research assistant, it's just, why wouldn't you use it? It's so good. I mean, you can synthesize data, it can search websites faster than you could. I have this thing when I show people Perplexity that I talk about how I hate Reddit, right? Like I'm too old to really be into Reddit, and I sort of missed the wave and never really got into it.
Yep.
But Reddit's a super influential place on the internet. There's a lot of discussion there, human discussion about things that I always see extracted in news articles all the time. But now with something like Perplexity, which actually has kind of a Reddit filter, you can ask it to search only Reddit and summarize discussions there. It's a great tool for me. Now Reddit, which was a previous sort of slog for me to research, I can do pretty much instantaneously, and sort of showing those things more to people, I think will sort of get them on board. But I think what we're going to see in terms of the future is a systemizing of that, of like, oh, you come to a newsroom, here are our AI research tools that we like, that are probably best for you. And you as a reporter or an editor specialized on this desk or this beat, you have access to a trained AI that knows all the content on this beat or the major things, and it is just a really good research partner for the stories you're doing. And so that will, I think, really accelerate and amplify and improve like coverage in specific areas in a lot of newsrooms. And then on the other side, yeah, you're going to see just better tools for hitting buttons and getting social copy. And it's going to be an expectation that whatever CMS you have is just going to like hit a button and it'll do it. And those will get tied into distribution platforms, and a social media manager is going to be more about looking at patterns and analytics in these and sort of adjusting where the pipes go rather than actually sitting down and writing tweets, at least for most of the content. So sure. I think that's what we'll see. And then you're going to see some more experiments with the actual content. The only one that I'm aware of that's actually doing well, and I need to research this a little more with the guys at the publication, but it's a Semaphore. Semaphore Signals implements some AI content into what they're doing, but it's 100% reporter controlled, and it's curated within an article that they write the bulk of, like 70-80% of it. So it's so far like sort of the one shining example among a sea of like terrible experiments where people tried to get AI to write things. I think we're long past that now, and we're going to see sort of smarter implementations on it in the content process.
What do you think about the like the radio AIs and the AI DJs and stuff like that? Have you looked into all that? What do you think? Where do you think all of that is going with the AI voice cloning and whatnot?
Yeah, so it's funny about what AI can open up. Like, first of all, it's pretty amazing because I think audio now becomes a thing that sites couldn't or didn't consider before, and can now do much more cheaply with much fewer people. And with the whole thing with creating any voice you want, it adds an interesting wrinkle. But I would say that for radio and for podcasts especially, there's a certain amount of human connection, of trust with the host that is just, you can't replicate with AI. So I see a lot of sort of the opportunity here as something a little more functional, as just sort of opening up an avenue and a repackaging of your content, rather than something like entirely new and kind of breathtaking. There's the video version of this idea that was announced earlier this year. It hasn't actually launched yet. It's a site called Channel One, and what it is it's going to be At least it's planned to be this 100% virtual TV network. And so all the hosts are AI generated, all the scripts are AI generated, the voices, the studios they're in, not a single thing is actually shot for this idea, which is an interesting idea. And I'm very curious to see how people react to it, because my prediction is that it's probably not going to do super well, at least at first, because these aren't humans. People will be aware they're not humans. Like, even when I sit down and watch, Wolf Blitzer or whoever on TV, I know that's a real guy with opinions and ideas and whatever else. And, you can talk about trust or whatever, but you at least have that connection. And when it's not human at all and you're aware of it, I don't know. I kind of don't know what that is. Maybe Gen Z will be more into it. I know they sort of have the avatars and the AI folks on TikTok that they're into, but
it doesn't
I'm
seem
very
any
curious.
different than it doesn't seem any different than just somebody holding a little puppet and just doing all of the things in the background.
Yeah.
I mean, everything could have been written by who knows what with any kind of agenda.
Yeah, which you could do, and it opens up interesting ideas. I remember, like, probably 10 years ago, maybe more, there was a lot of these news clip networks out of Asia that would just sort of take popular stories, and there'd be weird sort of animation and avatars, and they'd be kind of fun and interesting to look at, but it was just a fun and interesting fad. It wasn't really redefining the future of news.
Sure. Well, tell everybody about Media Copilot, because this sounds very interesting, and it sounds like something that I love the podcast, and if you're not subscribed to the Media Copilot podcast, be sure that you do. But tell us about the coaching and everything else that you have going on behind the scenes there.
Sure, yeah. So Media Copilot is the website's mediacopilot.ai. I also have a Substack, and that's where I do a good chunk of writing. It comes out twice a week. Basically, the whole idea is to inform, educate, and consult on AI in media applications. So again, journalists, PR pros, marketers, we have classes that are tailored to each of those groups, and we will take you from the basics of prompting to using purpose-built tools in the scope of an afternoon. That's all our whole premise. We also have some really basic classes if you just want to get really quickly up to speed on AI and content creation in an hour. We have that as well. And for organizations, you can book a call with us, and we'll figure out a consultation on how to do some of the things I was just talking about. Like, if you're just starting out and you're like, wait a minute, well, how do I even get something that's going to be a research assistant, or what are the platforms I should think about with respect to, WordPress plugins or just an alternate CMS that implements some of this stuff? We can help with that. And there's even stuff that you could plug into Slack. Like most newsrooms use Slack today. It's kind of a cultural thing. There's some purpose-built tools that are like specifically in Slack, because a lot of these things, what it comes down to is, while ChatGPT is great, copying and pasting between a chatbot and a tab to your whatever else you're doing. I mean, you could do it. It's just that's not really efficient, right? The whole thing about AI is efficiency. There's a lot of systemic solutions now that are much more efficient, and we'd be happy to sort of consult with you on them.
All right, fantastic. Well, Pete, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate your time. Tell folks how they can get, obviously, mediacopilot.ai, you can get there, but give them all your socials and how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, Pete at mediacopilot.ai is my email. You can reach me at Pete Pachal, that's Pachal, on Twitter, also on LinkedIn, and a Mirror Pete in a few places like Instagram. That's just an old handle I had from way back, and I sort of haven't ditched it. So I'm all over the place. I'm pretty easy to find. Just Google me and DM me on whatever platform you can find me on. I'll see it, and we can start a chat. And yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Pete, I hope we can have you back on the podcast again, because this is going to be an ever evolving thing. The news next week is going to outweigh the news last week when it comes to AI. So hopefully we can have you back on, and we may even talk about your adventures with Doctor Who.
I'm glad you caught that. Yeah, I do. I host another podcast. It's called Pull to Open, and I've been doing it actually longer than the AI thing. That's me and my partner there, Chris Taylor. We basically talk about the program in completely random order. And as you'd expect for a 60-year-old television show, there's a lot to choose from, and it gets a little weird when you're going from the 60s to the modern show. And but we have a lot of fun, so it's great. But yeah, thanks so much, Jim. This has been awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and be sure to check out MediaCopilot.ai. That's where you can get all of his training and his courses. You can find out all about how to implement AI a whole lot better in your organization. And be sure that you check out the podcast too. Media Copilot, just do a search for it in your favorite podcast app and you'll be sure to find it. All right, so Pete's the guy to go to for AI. We are the ones to go to and the ones to share out if you or anybody in your broadcasting circle needs help with their radio station website. We're happy to do that because that's what it's all about. Getting more content, getting better content, getting more visitors on your radio station website, and making more revenue because of that increased traffic. All right. Hopefully this week has helped you. If it has, be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment. All of those help the channel. And whatever you do, be sure that you have an awesome week making your radio station website better. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Better Radio Websites. Remember to subscribe, leave a rating or comment, and share this episode with your team and radio colleagues. For show notes, archived episodes, and more free resources, visit betterradiowebsites.com. Need help starting or making your radio website better? Visit skyrocketradio.com.